Hello friends, it's Amy from Buttercake. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how I did 4 different spring-inspired bento cakes. They are a brown sugar cake with cream cheese filling, frosted and decorated with my go-to Swiss meringue buttercream frosting, and pretty simple floral piping on top of each one. They're bright and colorful, and I really like how these turned out. So let's get started. Starting on the cakes themselves, the sugar, butter, baking powder, and salt go into the stand mixer and get creamed together until it is nice and fluffy. Once that is good to go, you want to add in your eggs and mix on about medium speed until it comes together and everything is well incorporated. You can see here that I'm taking the time to scrape my bowl, and it's not fully mixed quite yet, but that's all right. I'm going to add in about half of the flour. Mix that on low speed so you don't make a big mess. And then about half of the liquid goes in. This is just milk with some vinegar in it to create a buttermilk and some vanilla for flavor. Then I'm just going to repeat that process of dry ingredients, the second half on low speed, and then the second half of the milk mixture. Also making sure to stop the mixer at some point and scrape the bowl. Not stop the bowl, that doesn't make sense. There you can see the second part of the liquid ingredients going in. So once I have everything in there and I have scraped the bowl really well, that is when I just put my mixer up onto medium speed and let it go for about 30 seconds to make sure everything's really well mixed. Then you want to prepare your baking pans. Now I have these cute little 4-inch pans. I put a little bit of butter in each one, and then I end up putting a piece of parchment down on the bottom. This is how I prep all my cake pans, and it works just fine for me. I also have my oven preheating to 325 degrees Fahrenheit while I was doing this, so that it had time to warm up. And I'm just using a paper towel here to put the butter in, as you can see. Yes, it does soak up a little bit of the butter, but not a big deal. I cut a couple of parchment circles and fit them down into the bottom, and then just smoothing them out so that when the cake batter goes in, it just lays very nicely. Now I ended up doing 4 of these 4-inch size cakes and cutting them in half, which you will see later. Once the pans are prepped, you can go ahead and put some of your batter in there. I did use a 1/4 measuring cup and ended up doing 2.5 per pan, which comes out to about half a cup plus another 1/8 of a cup. Bake those for about 25 minutes, and then you can check their doneness. If you press in the center and it springs back, it is good to go. Let them cool for about 10 minutes on a cooling wire rack, and then run a spatula along the edges, and they should turn out very easily, as long as you don't let them cool completely in the pan. I let them cool a little bit longer. They were still warm, slightly warm, not completely cool, when I wrap them in plastic wrap and put them into my freezer. You want to wrap them while they are still a little bit warm, because then some of the moisture that's released actually gets trapped in the cake and then they don't dry out, which is a total bonus. So I put those in the freezer overnight. Now to make the filling, this is a cream cheese filling, I get started with very soft butter. So I let it sit out at room temperature for a few hours. And then powdered sugar goes in there, mixing it well. This actually helps you in the way of not having to sift the powdered sugar. If you cream it with the butter first, then you can add in softened cream cheese, very room temperature cream cheese, and it should mix up nicely and you should get a nice smooth cream cheese frosting. Then some vanilla for flavor. Mixing it, you don't want to mix cream cheese too long. You definitely want it to be incorporated, but the cream cheese can kind of break and start to thin out a little bit if you're mixing it too much. That is ready to go. I also got started on the Swiss meringue buttercream. So that's egg whites and sugar. And this is over a double boiler. Just making sure that I heat it up to about 120 degrees, and then getting it on my stand mixer and whipping it until very firm peaks, adding in my vanilla extract. You can see here, very, very thick, nice, glossy meringue. And then slowly add in very soft butter. You want to make sure that your meringue does cool down completely. You can touch the outside of the bowl before you add in the butter so that it doesn't melt. As you're mixing up this Swiss meringue buttercream, it will look curdled at some point, but just keep whipping it. It will come together. Whip it on medium-high speed until you get this nice fluffy buttercream. Here is my thawed. So I set these out for about an hour to thaw from the freezer. Now I'm slicing them in half, just marking the way around the edges and cutting more towards the center. I definitely recommend a serrated blade to do this. A very generous amount of that soft cream cheese frosting in the center. This is the very yummy part of these little bento cakes. Just carefully smoothing it out, trying not to pick up too many crumbs, and just getting it right to the very edge. And here you can see I'm kind of bringing it back towards the center, just so that it doesn't kind of squish out into my buttercream. I want to keep it right in the center of the cakes as a filling. I don't really want it co-mingling with my Swiss meringue buttercream when I put a crumb coat on. So that can go, the second half can go on. And I just put the cut side up because it's flatter. It's going to make it easier to do the crumb coat. Here's the Swiss meringue buttercream. I'm just going to do a thin coat on these and get them into the refrigerator using a small offset spatula there to just put a very thin coat of buttercream on there. It's especially helpful with these really tiny cakes. If you just try to frost them, you're going to end up getting a lot of crumbs, unfortunately. And I went ahead and mixed some colors, some pretty pastel colors, to decorate these cakes and frost them. I did do a bright green though, just so it looked a little more natural. Here's some of the blue. Just use some blue gel color to achieve this, just a couple drops. It's very strong coloring. And I use a piping bag to get the frosting on there. It's a lot easier with such a small cake. Taking my time smoothing it out, just pushing it out to the sides there. On the top, it's really helpful if you have a turntable for this. And making sure that you have your cake on something like a cake board. And then you can also see I have a placemat there to help the cake board from sliding around on my turntable. I did take my time trying to get this as smooth as possible. And it's okay if you have to go over it a few times until you're happy with it. Once you are happy with it though, and it's how you like, you can go ahead and get it into the refrigerator. I put these back in the fridge to set for about 20 to 30 minutes, just so that when they're decorated, they're easier to handle if they're cold. Here you can see how I did the purple one. It looks kind of gray on camera, but it's actually purple. I promise. It's a pretty pastel purple. I think it's just the white balance in my camera. It's making it look very grayish, unfortunately. But this is the sped up version of me frosting these little cakes. This one I just have on a a rectangle. A rectangle of parchment paper so as not to dirty another cake board. And this worked totally fine. And you'll see why later, because they actually don't even stay on this. They get transferred into their boxes later. So yeah, just using parchment paper or some wax paper works just fine. You don't have to have anything fancy to put the cakes on while you are decorating them. Taking the top edge off here, I'm just using an offset spatula for this. No extra fancy tools or anything to get these little cakes smooth. Again, these are just lunchbox cakes, individual servings. They're not meant to be super perfect. Here I have my pastel yellow, and I'm just using a round tip to pipe some tulips. Pipe the center petals and then the outer petals on top, kind of meeting their bottoms in the center there. And pipe the other one over here on the side. That one got a little wonky on the end there, which I ended up fixing with a spatula later on, but that's okay, no big deal. It's just the air bubble in the bag, which happens. There's another air bubble. So I just had a pocket there. No biggie. You can just, again, smooth it with a spatula later on if you want to do that. There we go. And then I'm just using a very small round tip, taking that darker green and creating some stems. Trying to keep them, try to move quickly when you do that so that they are smoother looking. And this is a leaf 352 tip. And I'm just piping longer leaves so they look like actual tulip leaves. And just giving them a really organic flow, adding some higher up there just to fill in a little bit. And there we are. Beautiful. So that's the blue one. Moving on to the purple one. All four of these are different designs. Using another round tip and just piping 5 circles in the shape of a 5-petal flower. And I did these all over the top surface of the cake. Again, these are going in bento boxes or clamshells, so I didn't really bother decorating the sides of these cakes. You won't see it. Just continuing on with all of these flowers. Again, this is using my Swiss meringue buttercream, which you saw earlier, but if you would like a more in-depth tutorial, I will provide a link down in the description where I go more in-depth with my Swiss meringue buttercream on how to make it, how to store it, all those fun things. So if you want to check that out, that is in a separate video. So I tried to do varying sizes of flowers, some with smaller dots, some with larger dots, just to give it a little more interest. Then I came back in with that same yellow with the large tip and piped just center dots on these flowers to fill in those little gaps and to make them look more like flowers. Make sense? I wanted to add another detail because I just felt like it needed something else, so I added extra yellow dots in some of the gaps just to fill it in a little bit. There we are, lovely. This yellow one now. So I'm piping long stems. It helps to move quicker when you are piping stems. It pulls the buttercream a little more taut and gives you smoother lines. Just random stems though. Then I'm taking a number, I believe this is number 16 star tip with the purple and just piping little stars in a floral shape, like a coneflower. And just doing different sizes. Some of them are taller, some of them are wider. And I even went back on top at some points to give it more of a 3D look. This one's really simple. I like this one a lot. And there you can actually see it looks a little more purple, less gray, which is nice. It's actually a really pretty lilac purple color. And if there's any little gaps there, I just fill them in. Just a really organic shape. Nothing too specific. I did end up wanting to fill in at the bottom a little bit more, so I pulled out a grass tip to make it look like these flowers were in a spring meadow. And there you can see. Didn't look quite right though. I wanted to fill it in just a little bit more. So I added a second layer of grass just to bulk it up a little bit. There we are. Beautiful. I love that one. I think that one was my favorite. Finally, the pink one, piping some daisies. This is a 104 petal tip with the wide end pointing out and the narrow end pointing in towards the center of the flower. Just applying pressure and pulling towards the center as you stop pressure. Trying to space these leaves out as evenly as possible. It takes a little bit of practice, but surely this is a pretty simple flower to pipe. Filling in that last little space there. Beautiful. And then I took some of the pink with a round tip to pipe small dots in the center. And then I added a couple more of the daisies next to the large one, just a little bit smaller. Again, spacing the petals as best I can. Not looking for perfection. Obviously, flowers aren't perfect in nature. They're asymmetrical, and you have curved petals and torn petals and all kinds of things. Just so long as it looks somewhat like a flower. Then just piping a few more of the pink dots again to fill in the space and give it a very sweet, springy look. There we are. Those are the 4 designs. Now here I have some pink bakery paper, and I'm just going to transfer the cakes onto that. This is mostly just because it looks nicer, I feel. If you don't have the bakery paper, that's okay. It can just go right into the bento box. Transferring that as carefully as possible. And I did that with all 4 of the cakes. And then they just kind of slide right down into the clamshell. These are eco-friendly clamshells that I got on Amazon. They're not hard to find. And they are a perfect fit for these little 4-inch cakes. There they are. Gorgeous. And of course, I had to try it. And I can confirm that the brown sugar cake with the cream cheese filling is a very lovely combo. Very simple, but also a little bit of a nice surprise. You have a little bit more of a complex flavor from the brown sugar than just your standard vanilla cake. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you give it a try, let me know down in the comments how it went. Take care.